This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Kylie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And if you didn't think the summer was John Blaze, you need to ride with the Kyrie Irving faction, because they have just basically lit the Cleveland Cavaliers, LeBron James, and his entourage, and the whole NBA on fire with this manifestation that has recently come up over the last few days. And clearly we are going to be discussing it and a whole lot of other things. So let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, 50 grand, NBA aficionado. He rolls with, he is the owner of, and the big man, boss man in charge of www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. What is up with Uncle Drew getting a little raunchy with it, man? He, onery is your word, your terminology. I got to pull that word out, boy. Onery is Uncle Drew.
No doubt about it, man. You know, when you get old like Uncle Drew, man, you get a little ornery in your old age, but he's leaving the Cleveland Cavaliers standing.
Ornery at the fresh age of 26.
100, right? But he left them standing like he just crossed them up and they didn't know what to do. Just like, what happened here? And he's trying to blow by and get out of this franchise. So, that's obviously the big topic of conversation. We'll jump into all that. But as always, man, salute to all the fans listeners to NBA Baseline. Thanks so much for tuning in. Just when we thought it was over and they pulled us back in with some heavy headlines coming from the camp of Kyrie Irving, brother.
Yeah, definitely. So in a moment or so, we are going to be talking about the explosive storylines that have happened over the last few days with regards to Kyrie Irving and his demanding to get out of Cleveland. Also on the show, we have a really special guest on board. He is the author of one of the premier books that is currently out that discusses sports injuries. Dr. David Geier will be on board with us in our segment of The Drop to talk about his book and also interesting tidbits of things that has taken place in the landscape of sports injuries, specifically in the NBA. So we have an excellent show on tap, and we encourage you guys to sit back, relax, chill, and catch the verbiage that's being thrown back and forth by yours truly and my co-host Warren Shaw on our show, The Baseline NBA Podcast. Once again, get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms, available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, Player FM, iHeartRadio, Google Music, and the Roku channel. So download any one of these resources. Allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things in the association. You know how we do, and you know how we roll. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it down.
Time now for the breakdown. Kylie, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA Podcast. And our segment of the breakdown, it's all about that KI, Kyrie Irving, who reports Adrian Wojnarowski, the basketball, the basketball inside us, goddess, informationists. ESPN reports, Brian Windhorst and company. Everybody was on this when it broke, and it damn near broke LeBron James' spine, man. I mean, I'm sure it broke his heart, but it certainly shocked him. Kyrie Irving saying, "I want out of Cleveland," and this to me is truly indicative, Shaw, of the moniker changing of the guards. Have we not seen this throughout the summer, Shaw? The attitude, the demeanor of the current platform of the NBA guard. We hail these guys. We put so much responsibility. We put a tremendous amount of responsibility on these guys that they have to be the carriers, the leaders for their basketball team. And now we're starting to see dudes just getting fed up. Chris Paul getting fed up, right? Now Kyrie Irving getting fed up. And they want out. They don't want to deal with the nonsense. And I don't know if people can take a look at it for what it is. Most fans are a little too eccentric with it, because I think in their minds it's just like, oh, he's got beef with LeBron James. Maybe it's just the simple fact that they just don't like the atmosphere that they're playing in, and they want to change. And is that really a bad thing if you're Kyrie Irving?
Well, there's 1,000 layers, you know what I mean, to this cat that we can skin and peel, brother. There's so many things that are happening. You know, you've got conversations, very, very forthright. Okay, does Kyrie not like LeBron, or LeBron's gonna leave, so Kyrie doesn't want to be there by himself. He knows what it's like without LeBron. Did LeBron leak Kyrie's intent to want to be traded out before it was supposed to be out? And all these different factors and facets coming in. They almost traded Kyrie not at the trade deadline, at the NBA draft to Phoenix, but LeBron miraculously came and stepped in and said, no, don't do. Like, we don't even know what the real truth is, other than the fact that the Cleveland Cavaliers seem to be moving on. And just as before we record our show over the weekend, yes, this Kyrie news kind of broke, but almost the nail in the coffin, if you will, as we record, is Derrick Rose inking his deal to join LeBron James in Cleveland now. So, and LeBron subtweeting the hell out of things right now with a bunch of rose emojis, and very seem to be very happy that Derrick Rose is coming to this roster now. And that almost to me signifies a nail in the coffin that Kyrie's all but gone from this team, and there's no way that this relationship can be salvaged moving forward.
But see, so again, and you use the word relationship because maybe in some
Not
ways,
even with LeBron, I mean with the organization.
right? But again, layers, right? We're talking about layers. Like, what really was the relationship with Kyrie Irving and the Cleveland Cavaliers? Like, I think in that in some way, shape, or form, we completely bought into this idea that Kyrie Irving was absolutely okay with LeBron James coming back to Cleveland. Was he really that okay? Was he really good with that? Like, that's what I mean. Sometimes we often just take things as face value because we're already forming this team together like Voltron before we understand the components of what makes those, the characters of the players, who they are. We did the same thing with Kevin Love. We kept saying to ourselves, oh, because LeBron James wanted Kevin Love, should automatically ingratiate himself. And, it should just be automatic that he should dummy himself down and not be the guy. And then we're almost talking about how many years has it been now that we've been talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers trading Kevin Love. And all the while, it was never Kevin Love that would probably be on the block. It was probably going to be Kyrie Irving because we truly did not understand your word that you use, Shaw, the relationship that Kyrie Irving has not just with LeBron James, but that he has with the Cleveland Cavaliers organization and the Cleveland Cavaliers fan base.
Well, we even need to back up some too, because there is so much disarray within the organization. And Gilbert not re-upping with David Griffin, and all this kind of chaos happening with the Cavs having a real.
It certainly didn't help the cause.
Right. And then, a guy, an esteemed guy, although he's inexperienced as a general manager, obviously, but a veteran that would gain respect from the players, and Chauncey Billups kind of declining the offer to go to Cleveland, and all kinds of rumors as to why he did that or why he decided not to come there. But nevertheless, the organization just doesn't seem to be in a good place 2 years removed, if you will, from winning an NBA championship, and again, and making the NBA Finals 3 straight seasons. So it is very, very peculiar, and I think that was Kyrie's word, that things have gone the way they have, and you want to see now what happens, because he doesn't have a no trade clause. He's not Carmelo Anthony. Yeah, he gave his list of teams that he'd like to go to, but he has no power, no leverage. So Cleveland has all the ability and assets now to do what's best for them, and this is going to be a very similar situation that we saw, I think, recently with Boston and Paul George. Not that Boston is going to be in the mix, although there are rumors. I guess we can touch on that a little
Boston is always in the mix. Oh my God.
Yeah, Danny, Trader Danny, right? But the Cleveland Cavaliers are not going to want to see Kyrie Irving on a regular basis. And I know there's like, oh, well, what's one more home game that you have to see him if he's in the Eastern Conference? You'll play them 4 times as opposed to 2 times if he goes to the West. It's just one of those things, and I'd be stunned, shocked, and amazed if in a trade he wasn't shipped out west, some to see him team out there, whoever that may be. I just can't imagine that he ends up east unless the haul is just astronomical, or it's just one of those Godfather deals that they can't.
Oh, you mean so like the New York Knicks offering up another like 4 or 5 first round draft picks to bring him?
I mean, it would probably take Porzingis, Melo, and a first rounder. For Kyrie. Then you probably say, all right, well, no doubt, we'll play him 4 times, no problem. You do that deal 100 times out of 100. But I don't think the Knicks and their new general management is likely to do something crazy like that. Although Melo is obviously on the table, I can't imagine that they trade Porzingis in any way, shape, or perform. And yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot to discuss, but let's jump into that right now. Just of the teams he mentioned the Knicks, right? He mentioned the Miami Heat, the San Antonio Spurs, and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Of that lot, which team do you like the best for him if he did really was able to get his way, if you will, and have to say to break
Sorry, I was waiting for there was some noise that was popping off before. So which teams would I think that Kyrie Irving would
Yeah, the teams
be?
he listed. Teams he listed.
In an ideal world, I would have said the Minnesota Timberwolves. In an ideal world, albeit though, you know, Tom Thibodeau really gave himself very little flexibility for that. You know, um, the most savvy move, however, would be the San Antonio Spurs. And
I
and in all honesty, it would be the best move if you're Kyrie Irving, because Kyrie Irving would play the 2 position. Okay, I don't think that unless the San Antonio Spurs' intention is that they're going to give up Dejounte Murray, which I don't see the Cleveland Cavaliers pulling that card. Maybe as a project now that they've got Derrick Rose. But if you're the San Antonio Spurs, you naturally put Kyrie Irving at the 2 where he can score at will. And maybe, if anything, you can offload LaMarcus Aldridge. Maybe moving LaMarcus Aldridge, possible draft pick, and maybe a Dejounte Murray, that might actually help him. Albeit, I think they may try and ask for Bertrands, but I don't think that they'll do that. But that to me might be more their speed. Listen, Kyrie Irving, man. Kyrie Irving loves to ball out against the San Antonio Spurs. I think Greg Popovich would be chomping at the bit to have a caliber player like Kyrie Irving. And let's not mistake the fact that as much as I don't want people to get this perception that I dislike Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving is a phenomenal player. He's a phenomenal player. He's an NBA superstar right now. Okay. He's limited in the scope of what we're looking at as the modern NBA. That's kind of the face of the NBA right now. But his ability to score the basketball is absolutely tremendous. And that's one thing that the San Antonio Spurs, I think, while they are next to the Golden State Warriors, in a 2A realm as far as when it comes to passing the basketball movement, their ability to not get their own buckets when they need to. If you were to couple him next to Kawhi Leonard, we would seriously be talking about the San Antonio Spurs back up there again as serious competitors against the Golden State Warriors, come next year, if that were to be the case. But again, it would have to take a sweetheart of a deal to move Kyrie Irving from Cleveland to San Antonio.
Yeah, I mean, and I think of the teams that he mentioned he'd like to go to, I think Miami and New York are probably, well, New York, I guess, is semi-likely because of the Carmelo factor. Maybe you just try to swap 2 disgruntled stars, if you will.
But Cleveland is enamored with the draft pick, Shaw. That's the reason why I could see them doing something like that, because they're going to think that these guys are going to auction off their future to get Kyrie Irving. They're going to probably get the inside track on draft picks.
Yeah, they might, but that's where a team that's not on his list, because Minnesota is a very precarious situation, and then even with Teague there, the fit's weird, so you can't trade Teague until December 15th. So you just signed him and then whatever. And his timing is just it throws a lot of things off, because a lot of teams now are kicking themselves in the ass, like, oh dang, well, if I would have known. Think about this even from the Clippers standpoint, and then even with Chris Paul saying, okay, well, he wanted to go to Houston. Well, maybe Chris Paul would have wanted to go to Cleveland had he known Kyrie was going to make this announcement, and then the Clippers would have had some leverage, and they.
Well, how about
that's a conversation.
How about a Cowspiracy theory? Throw a monkey wrench in your theory right now. What if Kyrie Irving did that on purpose to screw up Chris Paul's plans about figuring out a way to get sent to Cleveland, right? I mean, it's not like it's completely out of the realm of thought. I don't want to listen. I don't want to. I'm not going to be naive in thinking that there hasn't been rummages. They just did a very good job because it's a small market. It's a quiet backdrop when we talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers. It ain't loud and boisterous like it is in New York or like it is in Chicago or like it is in Los Angeles. I think that this thing has been percolating for a little bit. And if you're Kyrie Irving, you're sick and tired of LeBron James just having his way. You're sick and tired of LeBron James basically holding this franchise hostage. And at the expense, it may actually compromise the future of a Kyrie Irving, who I think has suppressed a lot of, his stardom, his uprising, so to speak, at the expense of playing in the throes of what has been going on in the last 3 years with the Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, keep in mind, because LeBron left, there's Kyrie Irving, and Kyrie Irving endured all of that suffering and that loss and stuff. And I'm not trying to give him an excuse. I'm just saying that I think maybe in some way, shape, or form, that could also attribute to Kyrie Irving's, wanting to be like, yo, man, I don't want all of this anymore. Like I don't want to play this drama filled. I want to go out and I want to ball. I want to ball with guys that are not going to make this thing out to be an extended, edition of sports gossip, because people just don't seem to like each other and care about each other. And I got to get caught in the crosshairs.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. We just don't know exactly where his heart is on it. He's tired of playing. He's tired of the drama. Does he see the writing on the wall? Just what is it? Does he want to go somewhere and be the man and win a championship kind of all on his own, where he's the guy who's leading the charge, if you will? And whatever the case is, all we know for sure, and I say that in air quotes, like I often do, is that he wants to leave Cleveland. So I think of the teams that he mentioned, yeah, there's some possibilities there. But I think it's more likely that a team that he didn't mention, especially with Cleveland holding the chips, when it comes to his trade rights, they're going to get involved. A team like Denver comes to mind. A team like the Phoenix Suns really comes to mind. They have some pieces there that really could work for Cleveland, especially in the short term. A guy like Eric Bledsoe, Rich Paul, that whole connection with LeBron and all of that. And LeBron has, gone out on record saying how much he loves Eric Bledsoe. Obviously with Rose there now too, that might complicate things a little bit. But Phoenix has a lot of assets that I think that could interest the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Kyrie trade. And with Irving, he's got 2 years left on his deal, right? This upcoming season and the following, he's got a player option. He's opting out of that no matter what. But that's 2 years down the line. There's a little less risk than it was, and when you're talking about trying to get Paul George on the team, you got 2 years to try to convince him of your culture and see what you can do with him.
All right. Well, listen, it's definitely heating up. I can't wait to see Kyrie Irving in front of the cameras talking because clearly he's going to get lambasted with questions about this. And I want to see, how much of this is he going to keep, civil between him and LeBron James. If there's one thing that I will at least credit LeBron James is that he really he does throw his peoples under the bus from time to time, but there's still a level of civility that he exercises whenever he's talking about current players and possibly former players. But this dynamic that we thought could probably be competitive again for the next year or two in this window for the Cleveland Cavaliers to possibly find themselves playing for another NBA championship may just have been thwarted big time. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown. Time now for The Drop. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And this week on The Drop, we have an excellent guest on board with us. He is not only one of the premier doctors in his field, board certified in orthopedic surgery and orthopedic sports medicine. He also serves as the publications chair for the American Orthopedic Society in Sports Medicine, and he also is the communications council chair for its board of directors. He currently has a new book out, which has been getting high praises from elite people like Dr. James Andrews, author of Any Given Monday, and also former NBA players like Caron Butler. His book is entitled That's Gotta Hurt: The Injuries That Changed Sports Forever. Our special guest, Dr. David Geier, on board with us here this week on the Baseline NBA podcast. Dr. Geier, thanks for hopping on board with us.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
One of the things, David, that has really stood out to me is how we as fans are completely enamored and we're mystified on the modern day athlete. And we often, myself and Shaw, we we talk about it in high regards that, people get caught up in the numbers, people get caught up in the the mystification of how these guys go out and just pull out these majestic type performances. But I think for myself, and I think I can even speak for Shaw in some degree, is their ability to be able to do this for such an extended period of time and the rigors of playing in the kind of sports that they play, whether it be basketball, football, baseball. It's amazing to me that some of these guys have been able to endure some pretty extended careers, but your book really meshes into and explores that it's a phenomenal change and it's a transformation, and that us as fans, we shouldn't take this for granted in what we're seeing from some of the premier athletes in today's game.
No, I mean it's light years ahead of where it was in the 60s, 70s, even early 80s. I mean, guys would suffer things like ACL tears and would end their careers, or if they had surgery, they were basically barely able to move down the court. And it was with all sorts of different types of injuries. I mean, it's just, the surgeries are better, the rehab is better. And a lot of that has translated now into studying prevention strategies to keep these guys healthy. And yeah, I mean, it's no question, as we're going to talk about, I'm sure, a very, very demanding sport. But I think that to be able to play at this level of intensity and physicality, the way the NBA is played now, and still have these guys playing into their mid to late 30s, sometimes even up to 40 years old, is truly amazing.
So, Dr. Geier, tell us a little bit about what got you into this field per se. And, being a doctor is one thing, but then kind of being a doctor that's going to work with athletes. Athletes is a whole other thing. There's a whole other level of egos and things that you're going to have to work with and deal around. How did you first get into this, and what made you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I played sports growing up. I played different sports every season. Soccer, basketball, baseball. Even was on a swim team for 6 years. Playing different sports. I was never a stellar athlete, but I basically stuck with it. Got through travel soccer and various things, but just loved playing sports. Loved to exercise my whole life. Go to medical school, immediately orthopedic surgery jumped out at me because it's a field where you get to fix problems rather than just sort of tweaking people's symptoms, their high blood pressure or their diabetes, but you're not fixing the underlying problem. Orthopedics, you're actually, something's broken, you fix it, or something's torn, you fix it. And then once I got into orthopedic surgery, there was just something really, really gratifying from the pro level down to the adult weekend warriors. There's something really gratifying about telling somebody, hey, look, now that your surgery is over and you've done the rehab, or maybe it's not surgery, it's just they're recovering from injury, and the excitement in their face when you tell them they're cleared to play is better than anything else. And so it's made every part of what I do enjoyable.
Dr. David Geier here, joining us on the Baseline NBA podcast. You can catch his Twitter handle at Dr. David Geier. So I like to look at it as somebody who's not going to come off as saying I'm a savant, and I appreciate what the modern athlete is currently doing to try and sustain their ability to play this game. And to your point, we've advanced so far, but I still see where there are those tendencies for some players who it seems like the off season is where they put in their most grueling work, and yet it doesn't often translate to their ability to play a full 82 game schedule, a full 82 game season. I take someone like Blake Griffin, for example, who when he first came into the NBA was putting on some of the most rigorous off-season workouts that I'd ever seen. And to his credit, I'm like, yeah, the guy is a beast, but he doesn't stay healthy for the course of an NBA season. How do you parse that when you specialize with the athletes that you work with? How do you temper them from overdoing it in the off season so that they are better able to handle the rigors of playing through a grueling schedule in an NBA season?
Yeah, there's no question it's tricky. I think that's the first part of what you said. I think it leads to the second. I think one of the really interesting things about the NBA, and to be fair, probably with most of the top level professional sports, is it's almost this survival of the fittest. There's something about the demands of college sports and then getting drafted and then being able to stay healthy enough to stay on the court that it basically weeds a lot of people out. And you hate to label guys as injury prone because some of Blake Griffin's injuries, he's a great example. Some of those are just bad luck. Let's be fair. I mean, you can't really help it. But then there's a lot of these nagging injuries that guys do seem somewhat injury prone. Hamstring injuries, calf injuries, quad injuries, things like that. And so it really is tricky getting into the what you do in the off season. If you're one of these guys whose bodies just isn't holding up well, then you have to do whatever you can off season and during the season to do the best you can to recover, and then also do what you can to build up. And that's where I think these monitors that a lot of the teams are wearing, and this focus on sleep, and this real pushback with the league about eliminating back-to-backs, I think that's going to help a lot of these guys whose bodies, for whatever reason, just aren't able to help them stay on the court, compared to these guys that do have 10, 15-year careers and seem like they rarely miss any games.
So what are some of the injuries that you've seen over the course of time, and obviously in your study and your research? Again, you mentioned what ACLs and things like that are different now, but what other types of injuries have really just changed the course, maybe even say 2 or 3 years ago, if there is anything that you can kind of point to, if you will, that, okay, what they did to treat this 2 years ago is different from what they would do even now?
Yeah, well, let me go back a little bit in history, and then we'll come up to present day. We mentioned the ACL. I mean, Bernard King, that's a landmark event in medical history in terms of really the first elite athlete ever to get back to the same level of play. I mean, he made an all-star game after returning from ACL surgery, where not long before that, Billy Cunningham, an ACL injury ended his career. So Bernard King and his medical staff, I mean, they deserve landmark praise. Now, going through ACL surgery is not a big deal. But even around the same time, another one that I would throw out at you that people outside of medicine may not think much about is just the ability to scope a shoulder or scope a knee through 2 or 3 little poke holes, as opposed to having to make these enormous incisions on the front of the knee or the front of the shoulder. So now we don't have the trauma to the muscles, and you get motion back and strength back a lot faster. So some of these recoveries, which were 6 months to a year, guys can get back in a matter of weeks or a month or two now. And that's been a landmark shift. That was in the early to mid 80s. And now we do 4 million knee arthroscopies a year, 2 million shoulder arthroscopies a year. I think that's probably one of the landmark shifts in athletes of any sport, not just the NBA. As you get to present day, I think the thing you're going to hear about, and we can talk about this going forward, but what is going to be the stem cells and the PRP that we hear about in other sports. That's going to be the breakthrough going forward.
Dr. David Geier, author of That's Gotta Hurt, The Injuries That Changed Sports Forever, available on Amazon, a quality book written by our guests so far. And so adding on top of that, the innovations of these new type of procedures, Dr. Geier, with confidence. And I know that part of this is also the mentality when it comes to the pro athlete, and specifically to the NBA. It's a curiosity thing to me. I look at a player like Steph Curry, who came into the league very questionable with severe ankle injuries, and has somehow found a way to play at a very high level and be able to maintain his ability to stay on the basketball court relatively healthy. Whereas the trend normally is once a player starts, one significant injury, that it just seems to mount up and matriculate to where now we're talking about there being a shortened life cycle of their NBA career. How do you look at these players in their ability to reverse that trend? When you look at it from a science perspective, is it something where it's more preventive, or is it more of the idea that you're asking them as they go through these procedures to tweak certain things within their regimen, in their day-to-day, that might help them build up better confidence and be more careful and cognizant of how they continue to play this game at the high level that they do?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a fair amount of that, what you're talking about in the prevention stuff. I mean, Steph's a remarkable example. If you had asked me in his first few years in the NBA, I would have told you that it didn't look good for him. A guy that kept rolling his ankles, had really unstable ankles, and he went through several surgeries. It wasn't just one procedure, and he was fixed. And I still think he has problems with it. We see him deal with ankle stuff off and on, and they'll take him out of games and they'll have him do this stuff. So it's a little bit of at a certain point biting the bullet and really trying to get it fixed. But then, as you mentioned, it becomes daily activities, daily exercises to strengthen whatever body part that is and minimize your risk of having it happen again. And yeah, it's really tricky for sure.
So I got a little bit of a, I guess a cynical question, if you will, and don't take it any
Shaw,
kind of
cynical?
way.
No, that's usually me,
you know.
man. That's usually me. I'm the cynic.
Trying to spice it up a little.
Okay, change it up a little bit.
We got this great guest here, and he's got a lot of experience. And so my question is this: it's not really that bad, but we don't want to see people get hurt, right? It's all about prevention, if you will. But as a doctor, what is your favorite injury to treat? What's one of the things that if an athlete or a player or anybody gets injured, was it like, I'm not to that I'm happy to see you here, but in essence, what can that gives you that greatest sense of accomplishment once that person kind of gets back?
I think my favorite is one that doesn't happen that much in the NBA. I think Avery Bradley had this injury, but you don't hear much about it otherwise. But that's doing surgery to fix shoulder dislocations. It's something, the average person doesn't realize. You think, oh, I popped my shoulder out of place. I'll just put it in a sling for 3 or 4 weeks and I'll be good as new. But that's usually not the case. If you dislocate your shoulder before 21 years old, you're almost always going to need surgery to reattach the labrum, the cartilage bumper, and tighten the capsule. And that surgery is really gratifying because the shoulder that's loose and sliding around, it really drives these guys crazy. It feels funny. They can't lift weights the way they want. They can't, reach out away from them with any kind of force. It's really tricky. And so, yeah, it's a long recovery from a fairly short surgery. But, I mean, it makes a dramatic difference in their ability to play.
Dr. David Geier here, joining us on the Baseline NBA podcast, our segment of The Drop, as we are in a very healthy communicative flow in discussing athletes and the significance of the injuries and the scientific approach that is taken to nurse some of our favorite athletes back. In his current author, the book that's called That's Gotta Hurt: The Injuries That Changed Sports Forever. One of the things that I often look at as as somebody who loves watching the game and loves watching the evolution and how science is affecting the way that the game is it's great that we can have a doctor such as yourself, an esteemed doctor such as yourself, really talk and dig in and get into the nuances of things that really don't get discussed when it comes to athletes and how they look at these type of situations. I mean, let's be realistic. Some of these players, they understand that, this is their gravy train. They worked hard to put themselves in this position where they can probably make millions and millions of dollars. And a nagging injury, a dislocated shoulder, to your point, something can completely derail that. Or an athlete who's at the height of his career in the midst of a very, attractive contract is now caught with an injury that can sideline him for the rest of the year. And then some, fledgling from nowhere, from either the G League, for example, comes in and takes his spot. How much visceral how visceral can it get between the athlete and the doctors that are looking out for the player's best interest when he tells him, hey, you need to cut back. You need to give it an additional week. You need to give it additional 2 weeks. I know people often focus about this with football, but I'm more so curious about this from a basketball perspective, because I do think that sometimes some of these players may be posting up some great numbers, but at their own expense, they don't listen or heed to the doctors who are trying to get them to play at 100% fully healthy and cut that part of it short simply because they think they got to get back on the court sooner.
Yeah, I mean, it's an enormous issue. And I would say it's just as important in the NBA as it is in the NFL. I mean, in my book, I wrote an entire chapter about Michael Jordan's injury, his second year in the NBA. And this was basically the theme of the chapter. I think that the challenge is, from a doctor's standpoint, is we always need to do what's best to preserve the athlete's long-term health. Just not rushing them back necessarily now. You've got to take it into account, not just even the rest of their career, making sure they can play a few extra years at the tail end of their career, but so that they're healthy and enough to play with their kids and run in their 50s and 60s if they want. So you have to keep an eye on it from that level. But the challenge comes to how many interests there are to push these guys back to play, maybe even before they're ready. And it's easy to point fingers at the coaches and the general managers, but these guys don't want to let their fans down. They don't want to let their teammates down, and they're ultra competitive. They want to win. And you're right. You mentioned, worrying about the guys that may take their place. All that factors in. And so I would tell you, athletes a lot of times rush themselves back. I talked to Bill Walton, and he told me he had 37 orthopedic surgeries during his career and after, and a whole lot of that was just constantly pushing himself to play through pain, and his body just started breaking down. And I think that's what we really have to keep an eye out for as doctors. But I think that's what athletes today in the NBA, and really at all levels and in all sports, they really have to keep in mind, what's best for me, not just playing right now, but making sure my body's healthy enough that I get the next contract and that I can play as long as I possibly can.
So when you talk about things like that, the relationship between the player and the doctor, and I guess when players go to outside doctors to try to seek second and third opinions from what the team physician may say, I guess that can be, like you said, very, very tenuous, if you will. And there's been some situations where even on the other side, where the team doctor maybe has misdiagnosed, an injury per se. I think it was like a guy like Kalena Azubuike from the Warriors, and then a couple of teams he kind of bounced around. I think his knee was misdiagnosed. I think something happened with Landry Fields and the Knicks team, things like that. Phoenix is a team that's known for always having a very, very great staff and always kind of getting things right from the medical side. What are some of the teams that you've had a chance to work with that that you really give some praise to, and maybe even some people that call you in as a kind of a counselor?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really, you hear stories of really kind of good success, like you mentioned, Phoenix. You hear stories about San Antonio's medical staff being really focused on the long-term health and doing what's best to get these guys back. I don't know that necessarily it's easy to say, all right, this group is bad or doesn't do a good job, because usually we don't know the whole story. We don't know, like in the case of second opinions, was it a matter of trust, or is it more a relationship between the player's agent and a particular doctor? And there's a lot of factors there. And it's hard sometimes that players don't have a medical degree. It's completely understandable. So they get kind of confused at what they're being told, and you're getting advice from 8,000 different people. And so it's really tricky. I think generally when you get to the level of being an NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball team physician, you've gone through so much training and had so much experience. Most of these guys are really, really talented and really, really smart. It gets to more who players feel comfortable with, reputation, that kind of thing. And I think that, again, the good ones out there far outweigh the bad. I think a lot of it is just relationships and communication with the teams.
Orthopedic specialist, sports orthopedic specialist, Dr. David Geier here with us. His book, That's Gotta Hurt: The Injuries That Change Sports Forever. And I gotta interject something real quick. I completely love the cover of the book. I mean, the scrunch of Mark Teixeira's face. I don't know whether or not he's getting royalties for that, but it's just it's just totally awesome to see. Like, that is just true. That's just a true facial expression of a pro athlete who really knows when they're hurting pretty bad. I just had to make sure that I put that out there. So kudos on the selection, on the quality of facial expression given by our Mark Teixeira. So I wanted
I can't take credit for picking that. That was the publisher. They really wanted that one, and it's a great picture for the theme of the book.
A few more questions before we let you get out of here, Dr. Geier. But you had talked a little bit earlier about how the innovation of stem cell surgery, and I think you had mentioned a couple of other procedures that are really are on the come up. In being that you are a specialist in your field, and specifically what you're seeing just over the NBA landscape, where do you feel we are trending towards as far as specializing in as far as from a preventive health perspective, the next innovation that's really going to be focused on maintaining the players who do suffer a significant injury? Where will be the focal point now, or the target, so to speak, to address the concerns of players that have to be cautious about this, and something where if they do land that injury, that significant injury, your guys like yourself and others that are specialists in your field are absolutely on it, and are working towards putting something together that offers quicker recovery, efficient recovery for the NBA athlete.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key, and I think that's what most NBA athletes and all professional athletes really want. To be fair, a lot of non-athletes, but weekend warriors want it, is quick recovery that's safe. Nobody wants to be rushed back at the expense of long-term damage, but I think that something that's quick and safe, and ideally, I think something that hopefully lets them avoid surgery. And this may sound weird coming from a surgeon because we want to operate, but I think if you can get people better without surgery, that's definitely a good thing. And so that's where I think, stem cells, things like platelet-rich plasma, these medical treatments, these substances that are basically, they originate from your body and then they're sort of developed in a lab and then re-injected into an injury to try to get structures to heal without surgery, I think is where we're headed. We don't have a lot of proof yet that we can absolutely make these injuries heal, but I think we're working towards that. And I think, things, it may, be early arthritis, it may be ligament injuries, but it's some of these nagging injuries too, the tendonitis of the Achilles and the patella tendon and stuff like that. If we can really start to reverse some of these problems, I think that's going to make an enormous difference for these athletes.
Last one before we let you get out of here, Dr. Geier. So, we talked a little bit about Derrick Rose in the beginning of our show here a little bit. Give me a player. I mean, Rose is a guy who's obviously had a lot of injuries over the course of his career, but give me a player that, you've kind of seen in the league for saying, you're like, you know what, I wish I could get my hands on that guy. I could make him right. Has there been anybody that you wish you could work with?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think the ones, and I'm, shoot, my brain is not working real well, but the guys, this is just a general category rather than, hey, this one guy. But these guys that have and we sort of alluded to this earlier, the nagging injuries that just add up over time, the calf strains, the quad strains, the hamstring things, these just muscular injuries that they're just constantly nagged with, the plantar fasciitis, and these things that these guys, may play 50 games a year or 55 games a year, but never can stay healthy through 82. But they're not traumatic. They didn't tear something. They don't need surgery. I think if you could get those guys with a good training staff and give them time to really rehab their whole bodies, even if it takes an entire off season, I think that if we could get some of them and shed their injury-prone label, I think that would be an enormous thing for a lot of those guys. And there's a bunch of them. Unfortunately, my brain is not working as well as it should right now. But there's a lot of these guys with nagging muscle and tendon injuries that would be able to perform so much better if they could get rid of those.
So in other words, what you're saying is Joakim Noah should spend the summer with you.
and Darren Williams.
Yeah, Darren Williams, actually, even though, I think that early Darren Williams, that was probably true. I don't know necessarily.
Well, yeah.
There may be more to that now, but I mean, I think that there's probably the scary thing is there's probably a huge number of guys that we don't really hear about because they end up getting cut or they end up in the D League because of these same problems.
Amazing. It just absolutely amazing. And so again, to your point, it's remarkable. We often think that it's more so they're getting older and yet they're like 28, 29 years old. But it really could be, to your point, that they have specific injuries that they have suffered through the course of the early part of their career that they have not truly addressed. And somehow it's actually caught up with them. One quick thought, and I was really curious about this as you just finished your last point, Dr. Geier. How much of that is this based on the hesitance, the intrepidation of a player's non-willingness to address a specific injury? Like they refuse to accept the fact that they are truly hurt and that they should really do something early to prevent this from damaging, what's left of their career. How often do you come across a scenario situation like that where you look at someone and say, if you had came to me 6 months earlier, we really could have addressed this, attacked this in a different kind of way. Now we're kind of playing catch up, only hoping to prevent this from being further damaged.
Yeah, no, I think there is some of that. And I'll tell you, I see that with a lot of like just avid runners and people who like to lift weights just as much as elite athletes. I think that's sort of a tendency that a lot of people have at any level of exercise in sports. I think that the key is to try to get involved as early as you can, because it's so much easier to treat some of these injuries early than if they've been lingering for 6 months or a year. And I think that there's a little bit of communication and just education of the players. Hey, look, we're not trying to shut you down necessarily. We're trying to get you back on the court, but we'd rather a short-term period of you being out and saving you being out for 3 or 6 months.
He is the phenomenal sports orthopedist who currently has one of the hottest selling books out right now. The title is That's Gotta Hurt: The Injuries That Changed Sports Forever. He is the remarkable Dr. David Geier. Dr. Geier, we so much appreciate you hopping on board with us this week and really bringing some true insight into the mind, the psyche, and also in the scientific field of where pro athletes are and how the influence of the medical field is preserving our favorite athletes to stay on the courts.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I'm a huge NBA fan. Just honestly, I love it. So this was a huge honor that you guys had me on, and this was a lot of fun. So maybe we can chat again sometime soon.
Oh, we would certainly love it. There's nothing more. There's nothing that we like more than rolling out the red carpet for returning guests, especially one as esteemed as yourself and that has the kind of fervor and flair. We love throwing out discussions all across the board. We love to definitely have you back on our show, Dr. Geier.
Awesome. Sounds great, guys.
All right. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time now to go coast to coast discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
All right. Carmelo Anthony still doing the limbo in New York. Although now the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Portland Trail Blazers seem to be in hot pursuit of the talented small forward / power forward / disgruntled forward. So what do we make of Carmelo Anthony being courted by teams in the Midwest and the Northwest?
I mean, it just goes to show you that I think for the right price, people are willing to take Carmelo on. Portland seems to be adamant about it. They were saying, oh, you want to use us as a third team to help facilitate the trade? F that. We want Carmelo for ourselves. CJ McCollum, Damian Lillard openly recruiting this guy. And now whispers that the Thunder might be in too. Would have Melo probably playing that stretch 4 position along with Paul George and Westbrook out there. That'd be very interesting, but I still feel like if it all is said and done, it's going to be the Houston Rockets or the Cleveland Cavaliers that end up with Carmelo. Either way, it's nice that he still wants it, right?
Hey, listen, who am I to complain? I just want it to be over and done with. Only because, well, I mean, because I just want the New York Knicks to continue to prove me correct and that they are, a bumbling idiot when it comes to the idea of making, sound decisions that are actually in the best interest of its organization. They keep Carmelo Anthony, they continue to look like a fool. They trade Carmelo Anthony or they move Carmelo Anthony, and I guarantee you they'll probably get him for a bologna sandwich and maybe a Metro card, fare. So, I mean, that to me is just the way of things for the New York Knicks. And, hey, I'm not going to complain. I just don't like it being in limbo. I would rather see some kind of movement. But, let's get on with the, with the festivities of dysfunctionality, right? Out in New Orleans, Rajon Rondo. See, this is what I'm talking about. Rajon Rondo can find a destination faster than Carmelo Anthony can figure out a way to get the hell up out of New York City, right? So what do we make of this? He's now signed to the New Orleans Pelicans. Now he gets to play side by side by Drew Holiday.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't like that move. With Alvin Gentry coming out and saying that he plans to start Rondo and Holiday, I'm definitely on board with most of basketball.
You know what, y'all? Listen, I don't mind. I think Rondo for the New Orleans Pelicans actually is a good thing for guys like Anthony Davis and for DeMarcus Cousins, because he's going to get them the basketball. I mean, if you're going to commit. I just don't like the idea of a Rajon Rondo and Drew Holiday as your backcourt combination.
Right, and that's my point. That pairing seems to be a little off. So you just, you can figure out a way where they start games, then I guess one of them will take their break early on, so then the other one can kind of come back in and have the ball to kind of dominate it and run the offense a little bit better. But yeah, the DMC really loves playing with Rondo in Sacramento as the season goes, so I think that's a great pairing for those two guys. I'm on another one-year deal, so not too much of a risk for New Orleans, but clearly this is their attempt here to make the playoffs, and whether or not that's going to be good or not for them, we don't know. But Dell Demp's job is on the line this upcoming season, so this is their last-ditch attempt to try to make it.
Wouldn't it be funny that his last-ditch attempt is actually the one he gets fired because of the Rajon Rondo sign? That would just be hilarious to me.
Let him go.
Oh boy. All right, out in Orlando, Maurice Spates, Mo Buckets, he finds himself playing for the Orlando Magic. Another mercurial signing by the Orlando Magic yet again.
Yeah, I mean, and they're under new management, so this is our guy John Hammond here making this space the floor a little bit. Doesn't require a ton of minutes to be out there and be effective, because when he gets in there, he's gonna shoot it. So he's gonna put up his points. His average rebounder obviously could be better on that end if he put a little bit more effort forth. But should work well in their system as they try to play a little bit faster against the more teams.
All right, out in San Antonio, it looks like the Spaniard is returning for another season, or maybe for a couple more seasons. Paul Gasol returns to the San Antonio Spurs. Listen, sound signing. He was productive for them last year.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he opted out so that they can have the flexibility to maybe not everything work out and liking up with Powell. Rumors of the deal a little bit sketchy at this point as we're reporting. I hear it's a 3-year deal, roughly about $48 million, but not sure on the option player. But either way, Powell going back into that lineup and just really kind of being a stabilizing force, a stable veteran, a good guy to have around the locker room as well too, doing what the Spurs culture does, always making it right.
All right, and word is that two cosmic figures in the NBA, or maybe DC comic related figures in the NBA, Kryptonite and Jared Sullinger are eyeing comebacks
from the old Celtics days. Shrek and Donkey, Nate Robinson.
Yeah,
it's Big Baby, my bad.
Yeah, baby.
Giving my
don't get Big Baby crossed. You
getting my hefty power forward.
You see how Big Baby spits that venom on Doc Rivers' kin. So, Kryptonite and Jared Sullinger are eyeing comebacks. Hey, Jared Sullinger looked pretty good in the TBT tournament, the basketball tournament. I don't know if that's going to mean anything for him as far as the rest of his NBA career, but we want to see Kryptonite come back out on the basketball court. I'm sure that there is a basketball team worthy of his ability to get out there and contribute.
Yeah, I'm a little puzzled by what happened when he terrible basketball. He's definitely better than some guys. I just feel like it might. Maybe it's a personality conflict. I rub people the wrong way. That's how it goes. But Nate posting his videos on Instagram showing that he's still dunking, still in very much in shape. Thunder down under 300 pounds. First time probably since however long. These two guys, one of them, see if they can get it right. Obviously, a minimum deal, 1 year, proven deal is probably what they have to do, vet minimum, whatever. And like I said, it would be a nice choice to come back. Sullinger probably has a little bit easier go of it, or easier path to take off.
Probably. I'm a little skeptical though, because again, I think it really just comes down to Sullinger's, his ability to, his stamina. And his ability to stay healthy on the basketball court. I think Nate Robinson is in better physical condition. The problem is that his position is a compromised position because there's such a high demand for guards, and there's guards all over the G League that guys can throw money at. I think it makes Nate kind of a haphazard. It kind of makes him like the Tim Tebow of the NBA. I mean, he was good enough that he could be able to contribute for some teams, but if you bring Nate Robinson, then he's bringing the fanfare of Kryptonite, and that might actually be a detriment to some basketball teams that might be forced to have to play him when they're not getting productivity from the rest of the guys that's on their roster.
I mean, it's always going to be about fit and role, wherever, if they were to get on to a situation in the league. And I think Nate at this point understands he's not going to be a starter. He's going to be a backup guy, maybe second, maybe even third string, couple minutes a night, go out there, get a couple buckets. But you have to go out there and do the hard things. At this point, even though you're older now, you're going to have to regress, probably play defense a little bit harder than you had been, and try to get into guys. And Sullinger, the same thing. Hopefully, he's improved that shot that he thinks that he's always had, from the 3-point range. If not, then get your ass down there in the post and do what you're supposed to do, and get some post moves, get the feet work together so you can do your fadeaways and jump hooks, things of that nature. All of them, like I said, for both of them, it's about fit. It's about swallowing their egos, and they could potentially both be back.
All right, well, there you have it. Another coveted edition of the Baseline NBA podcast. Hell of a show. What a guest that we had on board with us with Dr. David Geier, author of That's Gotta Hurt, The Injuries That Changed Sports Forever. Really, really great discussion from the doctor.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Geier, having a personality of that magnitude come on the show, and just so much that dearth of knowledge regarding injuries, and in a time where that focus is really heavy on the league and itself, as you alluded to, Adam Silver and those guys, really trying to make sure that they can prolong the careers of NBA players. And this is a guy who's made it his life work to be able to do that, get guys back, when they get injured, but also to make sure that they can live long, healthy lives. And kind of almost like the Derrick Rose thing. Remember Rose said a couple of years ago, hey, I want to be able to run around with my kids when I'm 40 or 50 years old, and things of that nature. I mean, this is what Dr. Geier is all about. So, yeah, you want to play the game. You want to play the game hard, but you want to make sure that you have life outside of basketball.
Yeah, I mean, listen, give credit to, Adam Silver, who's balancing a very delicate line here where there is that marketability and exposure to the athlete. But then when you have on the opposite side of the spectrum, physicians, doctors like David Geier, who has been studying this field, who's been surrounded in the element of what the pro athletes endure, and is really making a conscious effort to innovate the sciences that is necessary to maintain the athletes to recover from the type of injuries that they sustain, and to be able to play at a peak level for however long their NBA careers or whatever their sports careers entitles them to. I think that that's a good thing, and I think it should give some of these athletes a little bit of peace of mind that they can go at it hard. And know that there's people out there that really are trying to look out for their best interests, not just for them, but also for the sport that they play. Once again, we'd like to thank our special guest, Dr. David Geier, for hopping on board with us. And we'd like to thank you and yours for being a part of us and our show this week. For the Baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. Keep it cool. And we'll catch up with you next time.